Hello everybody, welcome to another episode 4 of Nuts and Bolts, a Game on Oz's weekly recap show of the ANZ Premier League for World of Tanks, and what a round it was. We had a big upset in there, along with a couple of outstanding individual performances and some really good work that we saw coming out there. So, let's get into it. Game 1. Game 1 we had Matildas versus Scorpions, and you see it kicking off on Cliff there. Scorpions got in quick on the attack, setting up, trying to get some cap pressure on, but then Matildas got a quick reset and they realised that they couldn't stay there. So you can see they drove out, but Matildas got them in a decent crossfire there. And you can see that they had great focus fire that suddenly took down Aussie. Quickly they got the tank advantage, massive HP advantage. And then Matildas ended up taking that round 1 on defence. Moving on to round 2 on Ruenberg with Scorpions on defence this time. You can see Matildas again tried to move in for a quick cap, but this time it was Russian from the Scorpions with the reset. And in the end it came down to Artie Noob versus Aussie. But Aussie with the fairly significant health advantage, and you can see here as it finished up, the Scorpions take out round number 2, so 1-1. Then on to Cliff. So Cliff, it's all about taking the hill and getting that sight, but you can see Whippet up on the hill fairly early, but he got a bit of focus fire and there's a bit of a trade-off there. Bit of a slow build-up, but 2 minutes to go. JT's crept around the back and got some attacks onto the Geordie from the Matildas, and Scorpions win that one on attack. So yeah. Then the last round, round 4, they started trading kills until it got right down to the last bit where it was a 3-on-1 in favour of the Matildas. Aussie did his best to try and bring it back, but unfortunately was not successful in that, with the Matildas taking the round, and we get ourselves a draw. Been a lot of draws in the series so far, but that's good. It just means that we get some pretty evenly matched teams, and it's really good to see everything that is going on there. Then on to game 2, which was Conquerors versus Sentinels. This one was tipped to be, well, for me was going to be a fairly interesting match, because Sentinels are sort of looked a bit rocky at times, and Conquerors, even though they're in a rebuilding year, have really come hard. They've come up with some good strategies. In this particular one, Goober for the Conquerors did take a bit of a circuitous route, but it set them up well for a crossfire. And as you can see there, it's a 3v3 at the moment, but Conquerors have they have, almost 1,000 HP advantage there, which is significant. And the Conquerors ended up taking that on defense there. And then again, so the same thing happened to Sentinels last round with them against the Matildas. Conquerors here move in for a quick cap. Three tanks on cap, but they just couldn't get into position to stop it, to reset it. And Conquerors again, 5 tanks on each side still available, and Sentinels can't get the reset and lose a round on defense there. It was quite astonishing actually for it to happen to Sentinels 2 weeks in a row. Next we went to round 3 on Cliff. Sentinels got out early up on the hill. You could see that they were really trying. This seems to be their map. They did well against this last week as well, and now you can see like they managed to get the Conquerors down. They've got a 3-on-1 advantage, and the opposition there didn't have too much of a tech. But then came round 4 on Cliff with the Conquerors on attack. Like they were playing out of their minds. Like it's a pretty close game, 3-on-3 tanks, pretty even on the HP there. But in the end, we end up with a 3-on-1 against the Conquerors against the Sentinels, and they just played it out. They did such a good job, and you can see here the 2-on-1 with a bit of focus fire happening on Wemo, I think that's how you say it, and just take him down so that only Cindy is left. And you can see with Slayer, he's eyeing him off. He knows that he wants this lamb kill. And bang, there it goes. Sends Cindy out on a ram kill there. Conquerors win 3-1, handing the Sentinels their first loss in the history of the ANZPL. It's a big thing. They have not lost a match, not just in this season, but in season 1 as well. And suddenly they don't look quite like the powerhouse that they were. They've been looking a little bit rocky the last couple of weeks, and having had a loss through the Conquerors, who was being seen as a rebuilding year, and against the Matildas, or a draw against the Matildas. That's big thing. So it's going to be interesting to see how that continues for them. Then game 3, we had Action X on Prokhorovka and Archers on Cliff. So this was a really interesting match. We had CJ for Action X going up and down the left-hand side of sort of the 1-2 line on the map here. And he got out a lot of sight and was quite lucky in the end. Like, there was 3 Archers players hunting him, and he managed to actually get the kill on Celestia and get away, which was a huge thing. Dell bled out a fair bit and just let Action X, but eventually, hang on, I think my notes aren't quite right, but this is the second game, but yeah, so the first round, Action X won on defense quite convincingly there. Round 2 went to the Archers, winning on a tank defense. They held Action X out of the cap point, and that just made it. Whenever you're on attack, you're always going to be on the front foot. You need to be attacking and making sure that you're getting in and putting on that cap pressure or taking out the tanks, because you can't wait. Time is the friend of the defender, not of the attacker. So Kane in round 3, Action X versus Archers on Cliff. You see Action X bled out a lot of HP fairly early on, and ended up with a 3v1 in favour of the Archers, which they ended up winning on defence there. But then into round 4, we had Eugene from Action X taking the hill pretty early on, and they did well. They held the hill and managed to cover each other really well, and ended up taking the win on attack for Cliff there, which also resulted in a 2-2 draw. Does mean that Archers do hold on to the top spot though, especially with Sentinels taking the loss. It puts a little bit more of a buffer between Action X and the Sentinels just there. Then on to game 4, my beloved Perth Panthers taking on the Brisbane Bulldogs. So round 1, Lightning Man got taken out fairly early on, putting the Panthers in a bit of a bad position, but for some reason the Bulldogs set up really well, but then pushed in quite hard and probably a little bit too early, getting them out of position and allowing Panthers to win on what is virtually a 4v5, since Lightning Man got taken out so early. So that was I don't quite know what the Bulldogs were thinking there. If they'd held back, even if they would have been able to bring in some reinforcements and bring up that win. So in round 2, with the Bulldogs on attack, Panthers did set up fairly well for the cap, but they bled out too much early on. JS bled out a lot of damage fairly early on. I think he got down to about half HP in that round. And with Dark getting reset, Panthers had to push out and attack, and they weren't quite there for it, and Bulldogs ended up with the win on defense. So round 3 saw lots of movement early on. The Bulldogs had trouble getting around onto the CP for their attacking phase. There was a little bit of humour there. I don't know why JS decided he'd fall down the hill straight onto Dark from the Bulldogs, and it didn't do him any favours, because then he couldn't get into position. He was sort of half stuck on the cliff, and Dark finished him off. But then somehow even with the tank advantage, Panthers are able to keep the Bulldogs off the cap point and win on the defence there. So going into the last game, Bulldogs did have quite a good setup early on, but there's some disaster on the Panthers side with one of their players, Lightning Man, disconnecting. So there was a good few minutes where Lightning Man wasn't there, and Panthers were playing eventually virtually 4-on-5, which was not good. Lightning Man was able to reconnect, but in the end it wasn't enough, and it saw that Bulldogs winning that round, resulting in a 2-all draw. So another draw, so 3 draws and a win for that round. What does that mean for our ladder? Ooh, hang on, stay over there, bits of paper. So you can see here, Adelaide Action X still holding the top spot on 7 points with 2 wins and a draw. Then followed by Conquerors and Sentinels in equal second. So Conquerors' victory over the Sentinels have put them up into equal second spot. So that's quite an achievement there. Then we also have Matildas, Scorpions and Archers all in equal 4th with 3 draws apiece. And bringing up the rear, Bulldogs and the Panthers on equal 7th with 2 draws and 1 loss each. I do just want to talk about this for a bit, because the ladder standings as they are, it's still, we're 3 rounds into this, 5 rounds to go, and it's still anybody's game. All it's going to take, if Perth or Bulldogs pull out a win, then that's going to give them 3 points, and all of a sudden they're up the ladder. They're in the middle of the pack fighting for a finals berth, you know. But Action X have done themselves favours by winning games early on. And Sydney Sentinels dropping that game against the Conquerors as well has really helped them sort of start to solidify that position. But once again, they're only 1 loss away from dropping down. If Adelaide lose their next match and Conquerors or Sentinels win, all of a sudden they're on equal points. And so it's still very open. And 3 teams having 3 draws, that's still very equal as well. One of those teams gets a win, it puts them up into the top 4, and all of a sudden we're talking finals for them. It is an interesting year though, but I do have a bit of a worry about the Sentinels where they're at the moment, especially after the draw against the Matildas, who they were tipped to beat, especially coming off undefeated last season and winning the premiership. And the Conquerors, who are in a rebuilding year, although they are looking good, they are looking very good in their game. So it could just be that they're refining a few things and trying some different things, and it caught the Sentinels off guard. Although the fact that they were able to be caught off guard 2 weeks in a row with such quick captures, that says to me that they're not quite setting up right, or maybe the other teams have just spotted a hole in the defences of the Sentinels. So either way, it will still be an interesting round 4 when we see that one. Moving on to play of the round. So for me, you just can't go past game 3. It was game 4 of the Conquerors and Sentinels. Just the pressure that the Conquerors brought, and then right at the end with Slayer just going, he wanted this kill. He didn't want to shoot down Cindy. He wanted to take him out in style. So he's come from across the other side of the cap point just to ram Cindy to finish off the match. And that act gets my play of the week this week. Normally we would talk about who's playing on Friday night, but given that it's Good Friday this Friday, we're not going to talk about that. We're going to save that for next week, and we're going to move on to the fantasy team. So I think I did quite well again this round. You can see here the best performers player-wise for the fantasy league. Madhouse from the Bulldogs bringing out 2 Panthers players scoring quite high. They're 2 randomised and Twit. Along with Goober and JT Goober from the Conquerors and JT from the Scorpions. So that would round out your 5 picks. And then coming in as a reserves, Nay Palmer from the Scorpions and Dongalord from Adelaide Action X there too. I only had one of them in my team. I had Dongalord in my team. But I still managed to jump up some more spots, so was quite happy with that. So I'm I think end of last week's fantasy tipping status, I was 42nd. Now I've moved up to 31st, so I'm quite happy about how I'm going there. Just need to continue on a bit more. We'll see who does well after the Easter break. See if people have just had too much chocolate. Now, boys and girls, it is time for another tank fact, and of course my camera is in front of it. Hang on, let's do that again. Time for another tank fact. Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, I'm going to talk to you about the Bob Semple tank. A good friend Zulu from the Game On Oz riding crew put me onto this tank, and reading about it, I just had to say something about it, because on paper it sounds like a good idea. So Bob Semple was a New Zealand minister during World War II, and after some losses to the Allies in World War II, he's come to the conclusion, and most of New Zealand has come to the conclusion, that if there was an armed invasion of New Zealand, that they weren't going to get any help from Europe. Which is probably right. They were too busy fighting on the fronts over there and couldn't spare any artillery to come back to New Zealand. So Bob Semple's gone, you know what? We need to build our own tanks. So he's redone some designs from the States, which are basically a box that goes on top of a tractor. And these boxes, the idea would be that these boxes would be scattered around the countryside, so that if there ever was an invasion, farmer could pull up and they would just bolt this box to the top of the tractor and off they'd go. Sounds like a good idea. In the end, it turned out to be quite terrible. So what ended up happening with these is that there weren't any blueprints, so there was no standard design for them. They were quite tall still, so they were very prone to tipping over. Also, they were limited to tractor speed, so they couldn't actually go very fast. If you've ever gotten caught behind a lawnmower, one of those tractor lawnmowers going down a road, you know how fast those things move, and it's not very fast. So that's about a similar speed to what these tractors were doing. And to top it all off, they were so uncomfortable. They were so hot. They put mattresses over the engine so that the gunners could lay down on it. They weren't actual proper mounted guns. They were machine guns, so they had one on the left, one on the right, two on the front, one on the back, and I think one in a turret. But because of the vibrations of the tractors, accuracy was next to zero. It was so bad. And in the end, there was only 3 of these ever made, and they were mothballed. And with how much ridicule he got, Bob Semple was quoted as saying, "I don't see anybody else coming up with any better ideas," and that's really the crux of it, isn't it? If you're trying to build something that to defend with, nobody else had any better ideas. At least he was trying to do something, even if it didn't come off. And that is why the Bob Semple tank quite often features on people's worst tanks ever list. And that, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, and everything in between, is a tank fact. So that is this week's show. Thank you everybody for watching. As we said, there is no World of Tanks ANZ Premier League games on this Friday because of Good Friday, but they will return next Friday, which I believe is the 9th. I want to say the 9th. Let me just check. Yes, it is the 9th. So make sure you stick around for that. And also stick around, come back next week for our Wednesday show, where we will do a preview of round 4 of World of Tanks ANZ Premier League.